Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 682. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. At the end of the year, planning and prioritization take center stage. In reality, we can only prioritize work, needs, dreams that are within our span of control. That does not stop people from trying to prioritize work that is not theirs to prioritize. We will also have a visit from Susan Parente, who brings her I'm Not A Scrumdamentalist column to the cast. This month, we talk about getting leadership right. It's possible. People ask, are we there yet? Prioritizing Outside of Your Span of Control by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. There are three common scenarios that generate prioritization decisions outside of an individual or team's span of control. Some of the most innocuous appearing prioritization problems come from decisions made on a daily basis outside of the formal prioritization process. These problems are rarely as harmless as they appear to be. Why are these prioritization decisions made like this? In Monotasking by Stefan Notenberg, which we reread this year, great book, he reminds us that we should periodically reflect and ask, what is the most important thing I should be working on? The question and the decisions that stem from how we answer that question is prioritization in action. On a more granular basis, every human decides what is the most important thing they should be doing hundreds, if not thousands times a day, every time they decide which key to press next on their keyboard. Many of those decisions have a ripple effect that extend beyond an individual's span of control. While that might sound like an invocation of chaos theory, the impacts are often far more direct. For example, when a coder decides to pull work out of order based on their specialty and jumps over a component needed for the next release, bad things happen. The implicit change in priority might place the whole release in jeopardy. In real life, I saw a credit card processor lose an RFP because they were not able to demonstrate a feature in production that had been promised during the sales process. This was all based on someone that wanted to work on another piece of the system rather than the one that was next on the backlog. This span of control issue is not always a bottom-up issue. Micromanagement is a granular approach to prioritization. While telling someone what to do and when to do it is technically within a micromanager's span of control, more thoughtful leaders see it as an overreach. Focusing on the consequences of micromanagement on prioritization, the micromanager cannot be fully aware of the nuances of the work because they're not doing it, therefore are apt to focus on the wrong action at the wrong specific time. I have managed several people that had been previously micromanaged. Each had to relearn how to evaluate the context they were in and make their own decisions. Getting permission to focus on what they thought was right only slowed things down. It did not make a learning moment. It is painful. It was painful, but in the end, the team was always more resilient and more flexible as we delivered value. The third scenario occurs when someone is not committed to the current set of priorities and thinks they know better. This is one of the scariest prioritization decisions because it is often hidden and only shared when discovered, and then rationalized. These prioritization decisions are then vociferously defended when exposed, leading to further division, not to mention the cost and time for any required rework. There is no way to stop people from making decisions, nor would you want to. But there is no need for decisions big or small to disrupt strategic or tactical prioritization. 1. Ensure everyone understands the true goal of work, what the outcome is supposed to be, how should behaviors be impacted, how much revenue should be delivered by the work, or cost saved. Understanding the real why, not just the highly polished mission statement, provides a basis for real decisions. Expose all actions taken and decisions made. Every action and decision changes the trajectory of a piece of work. What you don't know leads to wrong decisions about priorities later on. 3. Sync daily. By the way, what is the cadence of a daily sync? Daily! The daily scrum is daily for a reason. It provides a platform for sharing, changing priorities and decisions. 4. Continuously build the software to expose unvoiced decisions that can impact priorities. 5. Mentor or fire micromanagers. If you're hiring people that can't learn and think for themselves, whoever's doing the hiring ought to be out the door before the micromanagers. All kidding aside, if at all possible, try to help micromanagers change before providing them a change of venue. 6. Those that silently undercut decisions on priority because they know better need to work elsewhere. Most scenarios leading to decisions that impact prioritizations don't need to cause problems if the organization ensures transparency and creates a communication-rich environment. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com or leave a message at 01-440-668-5717. We look forward to the conversation. Susan Parente, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Susan, your I'm Not A Scrumdamentalist column, I look forward to recording it. We do that all in one big batch. I also get a kick out of editing it. By the way, just FYI, I'm still working on the flash art for the I'm Not A Scrumdamentalist tattoo that we'll all get, right? We'll have, maybe we'll do it in henna or something, or a peel-off tattoo or something like that. I'm not into the, I watched my son-in-law do that stuff. Susan, last time we talked about poor leadership, the impact on a project. I'd like to talk about leadership and, in essence, work intake. How to bring work into a team, the kind of work that a team gets, and how a leader's bias, especially if they're the only one leading or bringing work in, they're pretending let's say they're the product owner, they're acting as the client, and they're gating all of the work. How does a leader affect, how do their biases affect what work the team does?
Very, very interesting stuff. Thank you. I think it's a wonderful conversation to have. So, leader's bias. Well, first of all, this is kind of hopping off our last conversation. In order to understand bias, you have to have self-awareness, right? So we all have bias. I think there's this idea that you can get rid of bias. I don't think you can get rid of bias. I think you can recognize it and then have it not affect your decisions, your actions, but only in recognition of it. In fact, if you try to get rid of it, I think it tends to cling on more. Like, I got rid of all my biases. You probably have a lot more of them than you think you do. Whereas if you say, I acknowledge my biases, okay? And so that goes back to, my biases come from who I am, the environment I grew up in, the education I have, the experience I have, where I live, what country I live in, what part of the country I live in. All those things create bias. My heritage. I'm a Italian American, second generation. All my grandparents came over through Ellis Island around the same time-ish. And these things do create bias. Being aware of my bias, not removing it, but being aware of it allows the bias to not be in control. And I think that's the mistake people make. They think they can remove their bias. I think you can be aware of your bias. And like I talked about before, it's sort of like a pair of sunglasses. And if you're not aware that you're wearing sunglasses, you're walking around saying, boy, it's it's kind of dark, right? You're like, no matter where I go, it's dark. Well, if let's say you're a pessimist, that's what life will look like. Now, if you're aware of your bias, you can say, oh, I'm seeing it as being dark, but I know it's lighter in here because it's just that I'm wearing sunglasses, right? So that's a very different experience. So, for example, I got my transition glasses that I just started wearing, and they are dark when I walk back inside. And I go to take them off thinking they're sunglasses, and I'm like, oh, now I can't see. So I was like, so I just got to wait till they transition back. I'm aware that my glasses got dark because of the transitions. So it's not that I walked in the house that's dark. I know it's the glasses. So now that I realize that, you know what I mean? Now that I'm into that mode of that, I'm like, oh, it's going to lighten up in a moment. It's just my experience because of the glasses I'm wearing. And that's what bias shows up like. You're aware of it. It doesn't go away. My glasses still transition when I come inside, but I don't feel compelled to turn the light on because it's too dark in the house. It's actually not too dark. It's just my perception that it is, right? So our leaders do have bias. Our best leaders are aware of their biases so that they don't operate from them. And I've done a lot of growth and development work, and my first inclination, let me find my imperfections, let me find my biases, and then I'm going to go get rid of them. Well, first of all, we're human beings, so I think that's virtually impossible. A better place to come from is let me find my biases so I can be aware of them, I can acknowledge them, I can live with them, and then not operate like unconsciously from them. That's the key. It's the unconscious operation within your biases. Nobody, even the Dalai Lama, cannot get ticked off. Maybe the Dalai Lama is harder to get ticked off, but there's got to be a button that he has. We all have buttons. We're human beings, right? But if he's aware that he has that button, when it's pushed, he can either react to it or he can choose to realize that that's a button that got pushed, and maybe he's going to have a different reaction. He can choose to have that. That's actually acknowledging a bias, acknowledging who you are, how you are, but then not operating from it. Much easier said than done. But
Absolutely.
it's nice to know that it actually is simple. It's just not easy to do. But the not easy to do part is making that choice in that moment. Say, I want to react here, but I'm going to take a deep breath before I shoot that email out. Okay. I'm looking at a list of items on the product backlog, and I really want number 5, but you know what? I know my customers that I represent really want number 6 more. So I'm going to make number 6 a higher priority than number 5.
One of the common mistakes that I see boils down to a feeling that I know better, right? That there are, and I've seen this chronically in the technical world, I know better than my client what they need. And so they will make those choices. And obviously there's consequences to that. How can someone recognize that that's a bias? How can they realize? I think we've stumbled over this topic a couple of times, but we talked last time that it's really hard to help people become self-aware. Knowing what your bias is that self-awareness thing. Again, learning to control it, learning to take that deep breath. Once upon a time, I didn't know to save that email until the next day when I wanted to say, and a stiff memo will follow kind of thing, and send it. These days, it's actually much easier to do that because I've learned I'll write it and I'll save it in draft, and I won't put who I'm sending it to so I don't accidentally make that mistake. And then I'll look at it in the morning, and it's like every time you look at it in the morning, you go, oh, I was going to send that. Well, I wouldn't be on that account anymore if I sent that. How do you get somebody down that path to recognizing that bias, that they don't know more than their client, and therefore they need, whether it's they need to listen to the product owner or they need to have a team level dialogue to determine what's next?
I'm thinking about a friend of mine who had a baby in the last year and a half or so. Very, very challenging time to have a newborn. I just met her a few weeks ago.
Okay, fun.
And yeah, it's wonderful. She's adorable and lots of fun. And she's on that babbling kind of thing. I think when she really starts talking, she's just going to have like a soliloquy. It's not going to be a word. Anyway, so I'm thinking about, you know, my friend, her mom, she would love for her to have no bad experiences, right? Does she know better than her daughter? Absolutely, about just about everything, right? But just because she knows more than her daughter doesn't mean there isn't value in her daughter having her own experience, because that's actually part of development, right? So she knows how to walk better than her daughter, but can she make her daughter walk? No, instead she supports her in learning to walk and encouraging her when her daughter falls, I can't remember what the expression is, but they have a saying. They're like, did you do like a boomba or something, like when they fall? Like, it's instead of being like, oh no, she fell, because like you do that, and you can't see our visual here because they're not on video, but like you make that face and the kid will just start crying.
Oh, heck
right?
yes.
Right. And so instead the expression is, did you do a boomba? And it's like, oh, you did, and it's basically just acknowledging she fell, but not like, throwing it at her face. It's like, because a lot of times kids are pretty Gumby resilient, right? And so they bounce back up. But if you react negatively, they don't. So the point is before you walk, you fall a lot, right? So my friend absolutely knows how to walk better than her daughter, and she never puts that in her face. Like, you got to do it the way I do it because I know better than you, because that's not how the world operates. Like, she's going to learn her own way to walk, and that way will be just perfectly fine. And how do you know it'll be fine? Well, because she'll be able to walk and she'll navigate the world and hopefully fall a lot less. Like, we all fall. I've been a little while, but we hopefully as you get older, you fall less because the ramifications are greater. But we do all fall. I caught myself the other day. I don't know, I was doing something in the closet, and there's like a limited amount of room, and I almost fell, and I'm like, I better be careful as I get older, because if I actually do fall 10, 20 years from now, I might end up in the hospital or something. Like, it was like a little thing, but it was like, wow, I was like, you got to be careful. So anyway, but so even us perfect adult walkers fall, right? So that's, I mean, yeah. So obviously, if we're supporting our client, if they're paying for us to be there, it's probably because we know something they don't know. But as far as growth and development, they're not going to get there because we shoved it in their face. They're going to get there because we got their back. I'm the visual I have is, I used to play softball. I'm not really that great, but just like co-ed rec softball. And when you're in the outfield, the other person, whoever's closest to you, is supposed to run behind you as your backup should you miss the catch, because they're going to back you up and catch the ball and throw it in. Because if you miss that catch, by the time you turn around and run to that ball, you've just lost at least another base, if not two, before you get that ball in. So I think of myself in that regard. So when I'm coaching or when I'm doing consulting, I got to let my customer fall to some degree, but I got their back. So like when they fail, it's not going to be a big fail because I got their back, and I didn't even necessarily tell them I was there. I'm there.
Oh, super. The whole idea of product owners in Agile and is sometimes difficult for organizations, especially technical organizations, to wrestle with. And they'll do things like proxy it out or make the technical lead the product owner because the business won't engage with them. I've also seen that kind of barrier in some of the federal contracts for reasons that probably make sense in terms of keeping things separate. But when you don't have that conversation and somebody else is making that decision, I think you end up with the team then ends up doing work, and to them it looked when they show it back or they start to get feedback, whether it's at the demo or somewhere along the line, it's going to look like they're missing the mark. And it's like, well, how did you get there? And then we spin back into how do you untangle that? Because that's a leadership problem again.
I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's important that the product owner realize that they are a representative for the organization. And it's generally not a good practice for that person to come from, for example, if it's a software development project, they should not come from IT. They should come from the business. A lot of times the business doesn't have somebody, or they don't understand really what that role is. But that product owner really should be understanding the value of different features. And, worst case scenario, it does come from IT. That person needs to separate themselves out from IT and look at it from the customer's perspective and what adds the most value for the organization. They can't look at it from what's important to them. They need to look at it from what's valuable to the organization, which is not the same. We all, no matter what role we have, we are called to leave a little bit of our identity at home when we show up in the workplace, right? And so particularly in that role, what it means to be a leader is not to get what you want. It's to make sure that the organization gets what it needs. And I have found myself defend people, support people who I didn't agree with, just because what I care about most is that people have a voice and people have support. And so that's an example of not putting me first, maybe putting we first.
I think that takes us back to the bias problem, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So untangling that bias piece, helping leaders, whether they're leading people, whether they're helping select the work, has to boil down to they have to be self-aware. And I really like the comment about leaving a little bit of who they are at home, submitting themselves, probably a bad word, or being submissive to the will of the organization, because that is truly what they're there for.
How about using the word aligned instead of submissive, being aligned with the organization?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. So, and that, we do that too. We do that in our relationships, right? So it's, what is my aunt does like some, marriage, coaching support, things like that. And she's like, she'll always say like, it's what's best for us, the relationship, right? And we honestly, you take that to the workplace. What's best for us, the organization? What's best for us, the customer? What's best for the, there may be different groups of us. There may be us department. There may be us division. There may be us organization or agency. And it's never what's best for me. In fact, what's best for me is what's best for us. So if I want to be successful, I got to be concerned about what's best for us. And then, by the way, what's best for me gets taken care of inside of that. Whereas if I just operate what's best for me, I'm probably going to have a lot of slots on the contract that are a lot of positions that are open, right?
We get back to that bad leadership, bad management practices that end up being bullying and really just laying into people at the wrong time. Susan, if people wanted to continue the conversation about what's best for us, how would they go about doing that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Parente, in the DC area, although I'm not just in that area, I'm also in New York.
And
or you can
everywhere in the world.
I am, because I'm virtual now. Don't you know that, Tom? This is the new way of being virtual. It's great.
Virtual, not a Scrumdamentalist?
That sounds like I'm almost not a Scrumdamentalist. Like I'm virtually not a so But no, I'm a huge proponent of virtually working on a Scrum or other agile method project too. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also email me Parente, Parente, at S as in Sam, the number 3 hyphen TEC.com. So S3 Tech. And yeah, so follow me on LinkedIn if you want. I try to post articles and different things, and I'll post when the next podcasts are when they come out. I'm also on Twitter, at Tech Risk Manager. If you want to find me there, post there maybe a little bit less often, but I try to have good content there too. Mostly project management, risk management, and agile. Thank you,
Susan. As always, this has made my day. And it's been a long day. So you had a lot to top, and you always bring your A game to these columns. Thank you again. In Reread Saturday news, as 2021 comes to a close, we bring our reread of Project to Product to a close as well. Remember, buy a copy and dive into the book, please. Great idea, even if you don't use the link in the show notes. The conclusion of the book brings the discussion back as a reflection on the turning point of the age of software. We also talk about what's next in terms of Reread Saturday. Might not be a reread. It might be a read at the same time. We'll see. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we will have a special show. Ben Wozniki and I talk about team topologies, both the idea and the book. Ben and I have worked together, hosted a video podcast together, and many more things. This was more of a conversation than an interview. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people